Hello, my name is Molly Keys and welcome to part 1 of kindergarten through second grade behavior in the online environment. I am going to be your presenter today. As I said, my name is Molly Keys. I am a behavior support specialist in Albuquerque Public Schools. I'm also an instructor at the University of New Mexico in the area of technology integration into the classroom setting. I have taught this course online for I think about 5 years now. I'm also an obsessive reader of education research, and most importantly, I am an educator. I've worked in grades 1st grade through 8th grade, with most of my experience being in 1st and 2nd grade. This time period has given us, as behavior support specialists, an incredible view of the different behaviors that occur in the online environment. There are some behaviors that are built off of issues that we see in face-to-face instruction, but there's also some behaviors that are built off of new things that we're seeing out of students that wouldn't normally misbehave, as well as issues that occur as a result of not being able to control everything in our Google Meet sessions. So far, our team has learned a few things from these commonly reported behaviors, whether those behaviors are students interrupting a teacher and unmuting themselves, or using inappropriate language and gestures, or just stepping out of class and turning off their computers. We've learned that classrooms that already had strong structures are transitioning more easily because they're using those structures as scaffolding to introducing students to the online environment. Teachers with strong relationships with students are also having an easier time in that students are showing up to class more frequently and trying harder in their performance. We also found that routines from the classroom can and need to translate to the online environment. This is important for creating a cohesive structure in which our students can behave. And last, we've learned so far that teachers and educators really need to focus on what we can control. There's a lot in this new time of transition and change that is completely out of our control. So if we refocus ourselves on the aspects that we can control, our planning, our instruction, the way we're talking to our students, and the way we're reinforcing behavior, then we will find this whole transition much easier on us. So, what are we covering in this video? First, we're going to talk about the continuous learning plan and you. Second, we'll go into the importance of building relationships. And third, we'll talk about expectations and reinforcement. So I'll quickly touch on this. The CLP and U. CLP stands for Continuous Learning Plan. It is a plan that was put forth from the Public Education Department of the state of New Mexico, then granted upon each school district. Each school district made their changes and added on to the document as they saw fit, and then sent those off to schools, and schools did the same thing. No matter which CLP you're looking at, there's a few key takeaways. One is that social emotional learning is just as important as academics. Because social emotional learning is weighed just as heavily as academics, that means that we are really teaching our students how to handle their emotions, how to communicate their needs, how to set goals, just as often as we're teaching them math, reading, language arts. We're doing this because in order for students to learn, they have to have their hierarchy of needs taken care of. And that social and emotional side really are important puzzle pieces in helping a student to learn in this new environment. The second part is that once you read the whole document, you see that the overall goal is for students to learn how to learn online. That's part of why we're not introducing as much new content. If we're introducing new content, then the students are not only trying to learn new content, but they're also trying to learn how to learn in this online environment. Rather, we'd like to structure and support their learning in this new environment by reviewing older material. We do the same thing at the beginning of the school year in the first 20 days. We review content from the previous school year while we introduce students to our new environment and the new grade level so that they can learn how to learn in your classroom. And remember, you may be hearing a lot of different mixed messages on this, but you have autonomy in your classroom. So do what you feel is best for your students. So we're going to talk about building relationships in the classroom. The reason why is because when students have good relationships in the classroom, not only are behaviors reduced, but it supports student well-being by building resiliency, that ability to bounce back from trauma, crises, and other issues. And it also improves their educational outcomes overall. Building relationships is incredibly important as we move forward with this era of online instruction. There are a lot of ways of building relationships online. Whether you're making it fun, or using morning meetings, humor, or self-disclosure, these are all ways of helping your students to see you as a whole person. If you're making it fun, try thinking of little games that you can play with one another. Or perhaps you can offer a recess or lunchtime where students can hop online into a special Google Meet session and just socialize with each other and with you. You'll supervise as a duty teacher essentially, but this provides a good time for kids to just talk with one another. Not only does that improve their emotional well-being, but it helps to build relationships in your community. Now, the idea of self-disclosure has its roots in just getting to know people. It's hard to build a relationship with someone that you don't know, so try starting by sharing with your kids. Share your pet. Share your workspace. Talk about your feelings about isolation and how you cope with these feelings. Talk about the challenges that you're dealing with in this new form of teaching. This will open up the opportunity for back and forth conversations galore. If you introduce your pet, your kids will want to introduce theirs. If you introduce and show your workspace, the kids will show you theirs. If you talk about your feelings and your coping strategies and your challenges, then your students will feel safe and comfortable in sharing theirs as well. You're modeling for them the language that they can use, and therefore giving them a chance and a method for sharing their experience. And that back and forth is part of what builds a healthy relationship. If you already utilize morning meeting structures in your classroom, then I encourage you to bring those into your online environment as well. Morning meetings provide a safe space for kids to practice their social emotional skills and for just talking with one another. In talking with one another, you can problem solve, you can play games, you can do all kinds of things. And the important part of this is that it provides another opportunity for students to build relationships with each other and with you. And last, humor goes a long way in building trust and creating a bond. So whether that's sharing a funny cat video of the week, having joke time, or even using ridiculous filters for your Google Meet camera, anything that makes a kid smile will help them build a tighter bond with you and create more positive associations. Next, if you want to have better control and behaviors within your classroom, you have to think about the expectations that you have for your students' behavior. If we want students to behave, then we have to give them the tools to do so. We need to teach them explicitly how to learn in any environment. Going back to the idea of the first 20 days of school, we often take our kindergartners, first graders, and second graders on tours of the school so that we can teach them directly how they behave, whether that's in the music room or the cafeteria or the playground. We teach them in the environment where they're supposed to learn and show those expectations. We need to do the same thing online because behavior does not naturally translate from school to home, and our kiddos don't have a sense of online etiquette. I mean, if you've been in a lunchroom, you know that they barely have a sense of in-person etiquette at times. So we need to teach our students the explicit expectations. We also need to reinforce those behaviors and sometimes have clear, structured consequences. So here's two examples of wordings of expectations. Both of these are built for the online classroom based on issues that have been communicated with our team. So we have positively stated expectations that all start with students will. Students will enter the classroom with their microphones muted. Students will only use the presentation function with the teacher's permission. These address those specific behaviors that disrupt your teaching and students' learning. Meanwhile, we also have negatively stated expectations, which perform the same essential task, but begin with no, which can lead often to more rules as you continue with your teaching. No cursing, no interrupting teachers, no cell phones, no rude gestures. Using the no language tends to provide a much more strict and clear view of the expectations, while the positively stated expectations give students a sense of essentially having buoys in which they can perform. The buoys provide a loose structure for the expectations so that they can feel their way around. Either way, whether you're doing one version, the other, or a mixture of both, just make sure that they're taught, rehearsed, reinforced, and that they are explicit to the students. So before I move on, I want to have a moment to take some time to consider. Are you consistent in your expectations as students? Do all of your students know the rules? When an expectation is not met, how is it dealt with? When expectations are met, how are they rewarded? Have you communicated your expectations for student learning to the adults in the student's home? And can those adults be an ally in helping your student to meet behavior expectations? If you're having any kind of struggle with behavior in your classroom, consider these questions. So let's take a quick look at reinforcement. We all know that in supporting students in meeting expectations, we first need to teach the expectation, then rehearse the expectation, and then reinforce the expectation. Reinforcing it keeps the positive momentum going in seeing that students know the expectation and are following it. So positive reinforcement, for example, is rewarding the behavior that you want to see. Now, there's a few methods of doing this. The two that I'll talk about today are specific praise and rewards. With specific praise, you're going to be naming the person performing the task, what they are doing, and what it shows you about them as a person. So for example, Leslie, I noticed that you got online with your mic muted right away today. Great job. That shows me that you are ready to learn. Meanwhile, we also have corrective reinforcement, sometimes also referred to as negative reinforcement. The negative reinforcement can also have some other definitions. That's why I prefer the term, for this presentation anyway, corrective reinforcement. When you're correcting a behavior that does not follow an expectation, you utilize corrective reinforcement. That can also be verbal. Leslie, I noticed that you were using the chat to talk about Fortnite. Please return your focus to your learning and remember that the chat function is for classroom discussions only. Now, I added on that last bit because in the presentation I forgot to add on restating the expectation. And that restatement of the expectation is very important because it reteaches the student how they are expected to behave. Now, of course, corrective reinforcement can escalate to the removal of privileges or the addition of consequences. But remember, consequences of a behavior or the removal of privileges need to be related to the expected behavior so that it teaches a student. So here's some examples of positive reinforcement that you might see or use in the classroom. Of course, we have specific praise, which I already touched on. It needs to be specific, immediate, and focus on what it shows you about the student rather than how their behavior impacts you as the teacher. We want to have students internalize their behavior as a positive aspect of themselves rather than externalizing it to how it impacts others. You can also have a set of rewards. Rewards can be earned in lots of different ways. For example, if you're using points on Class Dojo, maybe if your students earn 20 points in a week, they'll earn a positive phone call home from the principal. Ooh, that would get a lot of kids excited. Or perhaps if they earn 50 points in 2 weeks, they can get a postcard in the mail from their teacher. How many cards and letters do you think our kids have received in the mail, especially our little ones? It's probably not many. So receiving a postcard from their teacher would be an especially powerful moment. We also need to, of course, have methods of correcting unwanted behavior. Correction is essentially a method of teaching desired behavior through gentle correction or reteaching of a desired behavior. One of the most important pieces of this in terms of online instruction and face-to-face instruction is pre-correction. So consider behaviors that are habitual or recurring, or behaviors that you can predict. For example, if my students are waiting in line for a long time, I know very well that trouble will start to happen at the end of the line. Kids will poke each other, they'll start to push, they might start to play or mess around or even run. I know that before we even get in line, I need to pre-correct some of those behaviors. The same is true in online instruction. So for example, if you have a few kiddos that continuously and habitually come into your classroom and they are loud and disruptive, you might want to take some time to have them come to a Google Meet 10 or 15 minutes early so that you can check in with them. Have some special one-on-one time to build relationship and practice the expected behavior. That way they can demonstrate that behavior by the time the class arrives. You can also do this with the whole class. Everyone, I noticed yesterday that we had a lot of trouble keeping our mics muted and then unmuting them to talk. Let's practice that skill today with a quick game. Now not only have I pre-corrected, but I've also given a method for reteaching and practicing the behavior so that the students can be more successful in the future. Now sometimes pre-correction and reminders of expectations aren't quite enough, so we need to pull on greater resources to address behavioral issues. This is when our team pulls on graduated systems of response. They're the next steps, essentially, in behavior correction. So when students are not following a behavior expectation and it's become habitual, and every day they come in and do the same thing, they do it frequently in class, and it's really disrupting education, pull on a graduated system of response. This graduated system increases the severity of a consequence as the behavior is repeated. So for example, on the screen you'll see a little chart that starts with redirect or reset and ends with office or redirector. This might be for a behavior such as a student in your classroom who is disrupting the learning of others by yelling out. You would start with a redirect, reminding them of the expectation, or offering a reset. In a face-to-face setting, that might mean leaving the classroom and coming back in, or it might mean going to their desk and returning. A reset or a redirect in the online setting might mean getting up from their seat, walking around their couch, and coming on back. Then, the kiddo's still yelling and interrupting class, we need to escalate to a refocus. A refocus is a bit of a longer period of time in which the student is really reflecting on the behavior that we do not want to see and redirecting themselves to the behavior that is preferred. Now, if they've refocused and they've redirected and they're still performing that same behavior, we might need to escalate to something like losing points on our behavior system. If you have a behavior system that's point-based in which students can earn or lose points, it might be time for them to lose those points. Now, losing points didn't have any impact, refocus didn't help, redirecting didn't help. Now I need to escalate to the next step of calling home. No, none of that worked. Calling home, losing points, refocusing, redirecting, none of that worked. Now it's time to pull on your greater resources of the principal or redirector. Now the redirector, of course, is more for your face-to-face setting, but having the principal call home is absolutely an option in communicating behavior to parents. As you move forward in your quest for behavior management in your online class, remember that the behavior support specialists are here to help. Whether you're in a face-to-face classroom or an online classroom, we can offer you our support. So contact us if you need help with anything, if you need inspiration, or if you have questions, or if you have issues with a specific student or your whole class. We can also offer our support in a lot of ways, such as having a one-on-one or small group meeting on Google Meet. We could also sit in on your online class with our microphone and camera off so that we can observe students. We can discuss methods or provide resources via email. We can even talk on the phone if that's your preferred method. We can provide support using a variety of tools. If you'd like to contact us, we have a variety of methods with which we're communicating with teachers. Whether that's on Twitter, through email, or our website, we are going to be posting lots of resources and lots of tools that you can draw upon. And if you need extra support, please submit a ticket to our ticket system. This PowerPoint will be available in PDF form on our website, or we can email it to you if you request one at bss@aps.edu. You can click the link in that presentation or go to our website to find the link to the ticket system and tell us what you need and how we can support you. If you'd like us to make a video about a specific topic, please leave an idea for us in the comments. We would love to make content that is geared towards your specific needs, wants, and desires. I hope that you'll like this video and subscribe so that you can get more up-to-date contact from the BSS team. And we'll see you next time in part 2 of this video.